Okay, in our third lesson, we went back to looking at strings and we revised strings and how to use them. And there were 4 tasks that we were looking at. The first one was to write our own function to calculate the length of a string. Now, there are many ways to do that, and there are actually built-in functions that do that for us. But having said that, this is just, I suppose, a bit of revision to create our own functions again, to go through strings and manipulate them in certain ways. So here's the actual function written up here. We define our function, string length. It takes, there's one parameter, so it takes one argument. It's the string to check. We initialize a variable called count to be 0, and then we use a for loop, and we loop through each character of the actual string to check, and then every time we do, we increase the count by 1. So count is equal to count plus 1, or count plus equals 1, and then it returns the actual count once the for loop is finished. Just remember the indentation here, that's the end of the context of the for loop. And then we actually have to call that function, so we just print out a simple task1 here. We create our sample string, which is Jack, Jill, John, and then we have string length is equal to, and then we call our function. So this is our function call here. We pass it in the sample string, which is Jack, Jill, John, and the length of that then is returned and saved in this variable here. Then we actually do a formatted string here, so length of the string 0 is 1, and that basically, that parameter is the first element of our format, so it's the string itself, the sample string it's put in there, and then the length gets substituted in there. So the length of string Jack, Jill, John is, and in this case it's going to be 14. Notice one thing here is this backslash and inverted commas and backslash and inverted commas. This is an escape character here, which allows us to be able to put an inverted comma into our string, because note, a string literal is actually defined using an inverted comma, and normally that would denote the end of the string. But if we actually apply a backslash and an inverted comma, the Python knows that inverted comma is a part of our string. So when we actually execute that there, you can see it prints out task1, the length of string, and it goes Jack, Jill, John. The reason that I put the inverted commas in was to actually denote the string itself, so you could see it quite explicitly. So the length of that string there is 14, and if you count them, you will see it is that. The second task then, we were to come down, I might as well comment this out while I'm at it. So the second task then was to count the number of characters that exist inside a string. So this is actually just going to be an extension of the one that we did. It's going to be very similar here. So we're going to pass 2 arguments in now. So the actual string count, or technically I should have called it character count maybe. So we pass in a string that we want to go through, and then the character that we want to check how many times it exists inside of the actual string. So what we can do here is we can go we can use a for loop here. So for each letter in the string we want to check, which is a string that we pass in, and then we can do a check inside that for loop. If the character to check is equal to the letter, then we can increase our count variable that we have here, and then it'll return. So if it doesn't exist at all, it'll return 0, and if it does exist, it'll return the amount of times that exists. So when we want to actually call that, we just print out task2 here. So we have this variable that's going to store the actual return value from the function above. We call the function above here on the string. It's not called sample string anymore. I've got it commented out, so I better comment this guy back in. So sample string, so it's using that sample string, and we pass it in. So we want to see how many commas exist in that. If we go back, we can see there's 2. And then it goes to number of occurrences of slash. Note again, I'm using the escape sequence here. And I use it again in the string, and then it'll return that. So I'm going to pass in a comma character into our string. It's going to see how many commas exist inside that string, and then it'll return that. So if we actually run this function again, you can see task2, the number of occurrences of comma in Jack, John, Jill, John are 2, and that is returned there. Okay, and then the third, I'm going to comment this out here, and we'll go down to the third one. Now the third one is to rename a file. So it's actually taken a character, or it's going to take some sort of a file name, and then the new extension. So we're going to strip off the old extension, and then we're going to print out with the new extension. So here's a way that we can do it. So in this instance here, I'm just going to create a variable that has grasstexture.jpg, and I want to rename that. The new extension is going to be .png. So the output should be grasstexture.png. So then if I call the rename file method, I pass in the old file with the extension, and then the new file I should get, and I should print that out. So if we pass in those variables there, you'll see the grass_texture.jpg will be stored in the new file name, and then .png or whatever we pass will be in there. So the new file, I'll just create a placeholder for the new file name. It's equal to nothing at the minute, so I just say if file name.count, and I just want to count the number of dots in the one. If it's actually less than one, basically if it doesn't have a dot extension name at the end of it, I just append the new extension to the current one, and that's it. If it does, I go .index, and I'm going to have rfind, which is find from the right the actual placeholder of the dot, and that'll find me, because if I have multiple dots in the file name, I just want to find the last one, which denotes the actual extension name. And then once I actually have the index of that dot, what I can do is the new file name is equal to the string file, the file name from the 0 position up as far, but not including the place where the dot is, and then I concatenate that substring along with the new extension, and that should put in the .png and get rid of the .jpg, and then I return that new string that I have just done. So it'll be returned from either here or here, depending on what I've gone into it. So if I actually run this one, I can click on this here, and then it says renamed grass_texture.jpg to the new grass_texture.png. And you can see if I had have just used just assume that there was one, if I had assumed there was just one dot in there, I can easily come along and just have a dot grass.texture.jpg. If I run that again, here you'll see that I'm able to rename grass.texture.jpg to new name grass.texture.png, so it doesn't get confused, and so on. And I can just run it again there, and you can see here it doesn't get confused with that. And finally, I actually had, I'm going to comment this out here again, and we will go down to the fourth one. Now the fourth one was to actual the fourth one here was to split my string. Yeah, so I'm gonna uncomment all of this out. So this was to actually split a string up. Okay, so I'm gonna have Jack, Jill, John, and I'm gonna pass that through with, so I'm gonna split it up based on the comment. Now there is a built-in function called split that will do that for us. However, I want to actually split the string, have a list that returns a list of all of this string. So it'll return a list with Jack as one element, Jill with another element, and John with another element, all based on this comma. So basically our function is going to take two arguments, the string and then the delimiter, or the actual character that we use to find where we want to do the split. And then it returns a list based on that. So if we go back up here, so here's a definition, split my string. That's the string that we pass in, that's the delimiter that we're going to use. I'm going to create an empty list here that's going to store our return value, and then I'm going to put in a count, and then I'm going to have the string to split. I'm going to use the built-in string function called count, and how many actual delimiters are in it. So basically, if there are no delimiters in it, I'm just going to return a list with the existing, just with one element in it, and that's the full string that we passed in, and that's it. However, if there are more than one, what I'm going to have to do is loop through for everything. So I create two positional indices. So I'm going to have a position 1 is equal to 0 and position 2 is equal to 0. So what I'm going to do is find the actual first. I'm going to have to find where the first actual position of the comma in this case is, and where the second one is, and start finding. So for I in range from 0, so I'm going to go from 0 up as far as count. So basically I'm going to go through, in this case it depends, so the amount of times that there's a comma or the actual delimiter is in it. So there's, in this case it's only going to go through twice. So I'm going to print, this is just for debugging purposes. I put this print statement in, so I loop one time. So I can go position 2. So I'm going to start where the second position is equal to string dot split the string to split, and I'm going to find where the comma is, and I'm starting where position 1 is 0. So I'm starting at position 0 up as far as position 2. So when I find position 2, this is a debugging. I don't actually need these. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to append the bit of the string between the two positions. Position 1 is going to be 0 in this instance, and position 2 is the first comma that I actually find. So basically, and then that gets appended into the list. Then I set position 1 is equal to position 2 plus 1. So that increases. So now I'm starting the new substring from in this instance, in the first loop, the first comma that I find. So it's going to be one element past that. And then I have to return back up here. So position 2 is going to be the string, and I'm going to try and find where the delimiter is and position from position 1. So position 1 now has bypassed position 2 by 1, and position 2 will find the next one, and so on. And then I will come along, and that'll go through the number of times that I need to get, and it'll cut out each individual string between the delimiters, and it'll keep going through, and it'll keep appending each bit of the string in between the two commas in this instance into the list. And then when that's finished, the amount of times it'll go through, it'll return the list. So if I actually run this, you'll see here my list is Jack, Jill, John, and you can see it returned the list with 3 elements in it because I had it there. Now if I add in extra elements, I can add in, I don't even need those, Sean and Anne. And if I run that again, what's this here? Oh yeah, I need my end list here, and then if I run this one again, you can see that it'll fail. What has happened here? And typer string takes exactly 2 arguments given 1. Oh yeah, that's right. So we need to put in this comma here, and we run that again, and then it has returned the elements Jack, Jill, John, Sean, Anne. Even if we put in empty commas, it'll return empty elements. We'll return in. So for every comma, there was nothing between them, so it actually puts in an empty element. And even if we put a comma at the start, it'll put an empty comma in at the start when we run it. So we have this element here, an empty one here, Jack, Jill, John. So basically every string in between the inverted commas. And equally, I would imagine if we put in something like a hash and run this, you can see there's only one element returned in the array, and that's the original string itself. So because the hash symbol or the pound symbol does not exist. Thank you.